So I do want to thank again Twitter and Jack Dorsey for continuing to platform Gab on Twitter during this very difficult time for free speech. Now, this was about 6 or 7 months ago, but free speech has been under attack in this country and abroad. And it is important that Twitter, while they have been involved in some very, I would say, immoral or amoral, or I would almost go as far as to say unconstitutional depersoning and deplatforming of certain people. They've kept Gab around, and Gab being the direct alternative to Twitter, that's pretty cool on Twitter's part. So I give credit where credit is due. At a time when freedom of speech and Gab's very right to exist on the internet, having been deplatformed and debanked by a number of providers, their very right to exist on the internet has been challenged, and at that time, it's reassuring to know their voice will be heard without interruption. So thank you very much, Twitter and Jack. So, gotta give credit where it's due. I will smack down Twitter and Jack when they don't do the right thing, when they really reconfirm my belief that we need an Internet Bill of Rights by censoring, falling into that modern religion that is censorship. But when they do the right thing, you need to give credit where it's due. That's meritocracy. You don't want reverse meritocracy, where people, get rewarded for doing the wrong thing. It's also known as idiocracy. So, give merit where merit is due, and I think you'll find the world will be a better place. Gab is a great place. At Real Jeff Tidwell on Gab, and they have about 1 million users now, so it's a great place where you're not as easily censored. They're a free speech platform, and you can use the words you are not allowed to use on Twitter. Words are not violence. Words are, there is such thing as a credible threat, of course. You can't incite violence using words. So words can be important that way. But hate speech really isn't a thing. Okay, it's very subjective what hate speech is. And there's no clear definition for it, so it's hard to regulate and to create guidelines and rules for hate speech. If one person on Twitter can say something like, "Oh, I'd like to kill the president. I hate President Trump. I'd like to kill President Trump. I'd like to hang him. Hang Trump. Hashtag hang Trump." And nothing happens to them. It's accepted. Now, if you said that about somebody else, well, you'd probably get your account suspended for 12 hours or more. Maybe much more. In fact, you might be even in legal trouble. But there are certain inconsistencies in the rules. So, I think everybody should be treated equally, regardless of their immutable characteristics, their occupation, their religion, their gender, anything. Everyone should be treated equally, under the same rules. Doesn't matter if you're on the left or on the right, or if you're in the center. I call it a political sphere. Whether you're a bit of an authoritarian or a libertarian, or somewhere in between, you should be treated equally. Ideology shouldn't be the yardstick by which you are depersoned, deplatformed, debanked, demonetized, or disincentivized. That simply goes against the Enlightenment era philosophy of free speech. People like to, get into, well, in the First Amendment, it's not talking about private companies. And I say, well, private companies, okay. They have the benefit of being a platform and a publisher, a liability-free platform that offers some public services, public utilities like the president's account, as well as municipal accounts, and so forth. They have that ability of platform, liability-free platform. Facebook has more CP in their database probably than anywhere else on the internet, okay, based on all the instant messages, but there's no liability. Of course, then they go ahead and use their authority as a publisher to censor people for their ideology. Of course, they won't say it's their ideology. They'll say it's manifest observable behavior, mob. It is mob mentality. Get it? But read between the lines. Look at who's being deplatformed. Look at who's being demonetized. Look at who's being shadow banned here, or algorithmically demoted there. And you find that it really comes down to not so much the behavior, but the ideology. And that just ain't cool, okay? Because you need to listen to as many sides as possible and take the benefits. And if you see something that is truly hateful, they need to be there so you can point them out to the young people and to those that don't understand yet that that is not acceptable. If there's nobody there to point to, no example of evil, of immorality, then there's no reference point. You just have what's in the history books. And it leads to a world where, of course, by suppressing and censoring hateful groups, they then become the victim, the oppressed. And they do feel that sense of oppression that leads them to collect underground and become radicalized. And we don't want that. We don't want those hateful ideologies to be radicalized, or those hateful people. We don't want them to be legitimized and validated in their hate. We don't want to give them a further reason to hate. So I do not support most censorship. Of course, there is exceptions, credible threats, illegal pornography, incitement, slander, libel, defamation, doxing, and a few other select cases that I think we can all agree upon for the betterment of society. But it needs to happen on an even basis to all people. We need to have the same laws for every person regardless of their thoughts. Otherwise, you are instating a form of thought police. And I don't think George Orwell meant for 1984 an Animal Farm to be a guide, a handbook for how to behave and what to do. They were actually more of a warning, just so you know. So definitely cut back the censorship, guys. I know that it's a corporate environment. I know it's fun to get rid of your competition through these amoral moves. I get it. But it's not a free market if you have these vertical monopolies. They can do whatever they want, and they all coordinate. You know, people lose their traffic at this, like in this big block, this big old like torrent and like people will lose like a third of their traffic, and they'll be like, what happened? But what happened was the social media companies and these corporations, the big tech companies, Apple, Google, Amazon, not so much Amazon, but they are getting there. They're starting to burn their books a little bit. They're starting to ban certain authors. Book burning in the 21st century. And then you have Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all these places. Of course, Reddit. And they all work together and say, no. For example, InfoWars, which is just as credible at this point as CNN most days. I mean, say what you will about CNN or InfoWars, but the credibility is around the same, and maybe that's giving CNN a little too much credit. When media calls Gab a hate site, we should ask questions. Am I supporting hate when I advocate for Gab? Am I a hate activist? Should hate activists be banned from Twitter? Why don't hate activists start their own internet? Sounds dangerous, doesn't it? Language is very dangerous. Labels can be very powerful and very dangerous. Just look at how President Trump nicknames people. They all thought it was a joke, and then they realized, holy shit, he's winning the linguistic war. Because when you label people, when you put these ideas about people in others' heads, well, yeah, it can help persuade and control their actions. Okay, some people would call it manipulation. I say that persuasion and manipulation are two sides of the same coin. I mean, that's one way to frame it. You might consider that manipulative. But in my case, I think that it's important to separate those two because we're all looking to persuade each other and ourselves to believe something that is better for all and closer to the truth. That is, if we value truth as the ultimate objective goal, and I think most of those watching this video today probably do. So I did spend a lot of time talking about how Gab was being treated, how it was being deplatformed, and how it was being slammed in the media because there was a Gab user, one user, that committed the Pittsburgh shooting at the Tree of Life Synagogue. And I made the case to a friend. I said, if one user on Twitter did something wrong, or Facebook, and in fact that user had been a Facebook user, so why weren't there calls to deplatform and debank and destroy Facebook? Why just Gab? And of course, it's because Gab is a free speech platform and Facebook is heavily corporate partnered. I was going to say corporately partnered. They have friends in the legacy, the mainstream media. It's all interconnected, this world. And you can see in the WikiLeaks emails with the Democrat Party, if you notice the ideological slant, the bias that Facebook and Twitter seem to have, just take a look at the WikiLeaks emails and DNC leaks and John Podesta's emails. The Democrat Party colluded with the same media entities that essentially are partnered with Facebook and Twitter. So do the math and you start to see, connect the dots, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You start to see why things fall as they do.